heart raced as she hurried through the dimly lit streets, the cold wind biting at her cheeks. She glanced over her shoulder, a shiver running down her spine. The feeling of being followed lingered like a ghostly presence. The night had taken an ominous turn, and what started as a romantic evening with her boyfriend, Max, had spiraled into a chilling nightmare. It all began when Max suggested a spontaneous date night. He surprised Amelia with reservations at a secluded cabin nestled deep in the woods. The promise of a quiet evening by the fireplace had initially filled her with excitement, but as the night unfolded, an unshakable sense of unease settled over her. The cabin, surrounded by ancient trees that seemed to whisper secrets in the wind, felt both enchanting and foreboding. Max, usually charming and attentive, appeared distracted. His eyes, once warm and inviting, now held a distant and unsettling gaze. As they sat by the crackling fire, the warmth failed to dispel the chill that hung in the air. Max's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He would abruptly stop mid-sentence, as if listening to something only he could hear. Amelia dismissed it at first, attributing it to the eerie ambience of the isolated cabin. As the night wore on, Max suggested a moonlit stroll through the woods. The idea seemed romantic, a chance to shake off the unsettling atmosphere of the cabin. However, the further they ventured into the darkness, the more Amelia's sense of unease intensified. Max's footsteps echoed through the silent woods, but another set of footfalls seemed to join the symphony. Amelia turned, expecting to see an animal or another wanderer. To her dismay, there was nothing but the rustling leaves and the haunting call of an owl in the distance. They reached a clearing bathed in silvery moonlight. Max, his eyes reflecting an otherworldly glint, suggested a game of hide-and-seek. The childish proposal sent a chill down Amelia's spine, but she reluctantly agreed, hoping to lighten the mood. As she closed her eyes and counted to 10, the air grew dense with an unspoken tension. When she opened her eyes, Max was nowhere to be found. Panic set in, and Amelia called out his name, her voice swallowed by the vastness of the silent woods. A sinister giggle echoed through the darkness, freezing Amelia in her tracks. The moonlight cast eerie shadows, distorting the shapes of the trees around her. As she stumbled through the woods, the sensation of being watched intensified. Amelia's desperate search led her to an old, dilapidated cabin hidden in the shadows. The door creaked open, revealing a pitch-black interior. Fear gnawed at her, but a flicker of hope urged her to step inside. The air inside was stale, filled with the scent of damp wood and decay. In the dim light filtering through cracked windows, Amelia saw a figure standing in the corner. It was Max, but something was off. His eyes gleamed with an unnatural fervor, and a malevolent grin stretched across his face. The unsettling laughter echoed once again, sending shivers down Amelia's spine. "Max, what's going on?" she stammered, her voice trembling with fear. But Max remained silent, his gaze fixed on her like a predator sizing up its prey. The atmosphere in the cabin grew suffocating, and the air pulsed with an unspoken threat. Amelia, her instinct screaming at her, turned to flee, but the door slammed shut, trapping her in the darkness. The walls seemed to close in as shadows danced around her. Whispers filled the cabin, indistinct, but carrying an air of malevolence. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest as she fumbled for her phone, desperate for a lifeline to the outside world. No signal. The isolation of the cabin deepened, a realization that sent a wave of terror through her. In the oppressive silence, Max's voice resonated, devoid of warmth or familiarity. "You shouldn't have come here, Amelia. You're part of this now." A cold dread washed over her as Max revealed a twisted family history, one mired in dark rituals and a pact with an ancient force that demanded a sacrifice. The cabin, she learned, was a place where the boundary between the living and the supernatural blurred, and Max's intentions were far from the romantic escapade she had envisioned. As the truth unfolded, a ritualistic chant filled the cabin, the walls seemingly pulsating with an otherworldly energy. Amelia, trapped in a nightmare she couldn't comprehend, realized she was a pawn in a game she never agreed to play. Desperation fueled her as she sought an escape, but the cabin seemed to defy the laws of reality. Each step led her deeper into a nightmarish labyrinth, and the boundary between the physical and the supernatural grew increasingly fragile. In the depths of her terror, Amelia stumbled upon a chamber adorned with arcane symbols. The air crackled with an ominous energy as Max, now a vessel for a malevolent entity, revealed his true nature. The shadows coalesced around him, contorting into grotesque shapes that seemed to feed on the fear that permeated the cabin. Amelia, her courage fueled by a primal instinct to survive, confronted Max. She pleaded with the remnants of his humanity, but the entity that possessed him spoke through a distorted voice, taunting her with the inevitability of the sacrifice. As the ritual reached its climax, the cabin seemed to implode in a storm of supernatural fury. The walls warped, and reality itself fractured. Amelia, caught in the maelstrom, clung to the last shreds of her sanity. In a blinding flash, the oppressive darkness lifted, and Amelia found herself standing alone in the moonlit clearing. The dilapidated cabin, now reduced to rubble, left no trace of the horrors that transpired within. The woods, once silent witnesses to unspeakable rituals, whispered secrets that only the wind could carry. Amelia, battered and shaken, stumbled out of the woods, the moonlight guiding her path. The night had exacted a toll on her, leaving scars that ran deeper than the physical wounds. The chilling reality of the boyfriend she thought she knew haunted her, and the echoes of the malevolent force lingered in the recesses of her mind. As dawn broke on the horizon, casting long shadows that danced with the fading darkness, Amelia emerged from the nightmare that had ensnared her. The woods, though silent, seemed to offer a sense of solace, a reminder that the natural world could heal even the deepest wounds. Haunted by the harrowing experience, Amelia carried the weight of the true boyfriend horror story with her. The line between love and malevolence, trust and betrayal, had blurred in the moonlit woods. The nightmares that